Good evening, everybody.
Good to see
Good
everybody.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Supernatural Talk. And this time, ladies and gentlemen, a special occasion. Nick was actually 5 minutes early tonight.
I had to make it early for this special occasion, that's for sure.
Eileen will not be here today. She's got a football game that she's at. And Adrian also, we're not sure she's going to be here. She's got some other things going on tonight, so she may not be able to make it. So you guys are stuck with us. And tonight we have a guest who Nick has not shut up about for the last 2 years. She is now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at your bio. You are the author of the Chicago Haunts book series, founder of Chicago Hauntings Incorporated, and also a perfumer of Ghost Ship Fragrance.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually true.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ursula Bielski. Bielski?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great.
So, hello everybody out there in the audience.
Hey, y'all.
Tom's watching.
So, how you doing,
Tom.
Ursula?
So we're going to ask Jeremy?
I was asking, how is she doing tonight?
Me?
Yes, you.
I am doing
You're the guest.
awesome.
You're the guest tonight, so tonight is all about you.
I know, it's crazy. You know, for the last during the pandemic, I started a YouTube channel because we were still doing the Chicago Hauntings tours, and as Nick knows, we were doing all these events. We did an event like every month, live event. So I started a YouTube channel, and I'm used to now being the interviewer and, you know, the one that's talking the whole time. So this is actually kind of new because I haven't been the person interviewed for a long time. So this is cool.
For me, it's always fun being on the other side of that. So
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be hard to try to come up with a question to ask the person you're interviewing. It's like, okay, so what about all of that? So it's refreshing to be on the other side of that. Oh yeah, I did this and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
What?
So go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was going to say, and it's just awesome to like actually take part in such stuff like this too. Like once you get used to it and whatnot, it's just, when you bring certain people you've always wanted to have on such shows and interview them, it's just exciting.
It is.
Yeah, Nick was messaging me when he met you at that convention a couple of weeks ago. Said, I got her. Okay.
Yeah, that was a great time. What did you think about that event, Nick?
That was
Nick
actually
and I
a lot of fun.
Did you talk about it on the show already? On this show?
No, I haven't yet, actually.
Yeah, Nick and I were at it wasn't a Mutual UFO Network event officially, but it was put on by Sam Moranto, who's been the director of the Illinois Mutual UFO Network for since it started. I mean, for like 50 years. And he will often have these events at Starve Rock, and he'll have speakers come in, and he invited me to speak. And then I just happened to tell your dad, Nick, that I was doing that, and he had no idea. So then you guys came out, and it was really interesting. I'd never been to an event like that before, and the speakers were so interesting, and I learned so much, and I met a lot of really cool people.
And Sam Moranto, right before he left, I actually offered him at some point. I haven't told you this, Jeremy, that I also offered him about coming on to this show as well to interview, and he's all for it. So,
oh yeah, he's such a great speaker. He just knows everything there is to know about UFOs.
Yeah,
because that is a very interesting topic, and it's people have such diverse opinions on it. Probably more than anything else in the paranormal field.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was never really interested in UFOs, going back to when I was a kid and I would read, all kinds of paranormal books. There'd always be like the stories about the UFOs in there with all the ghost stories, which I was really interested in. But I never really got interested in it until, again, during the pandemic. Nick, you know this. I had some really dark experiences after 35 years of investigating ghosts and stuff, and then I had some personal stuff happen when my mom died and that kind of thing, where I really felt like I got very close to some kind of demonic thing happening to me. And so I really pulled away from the paranormal. But I was lonely and I missed my friends. We were all in quarantine, and I got an email that there was going to be this online UFO conference this one weekend. So I was like, oh, that sounds cool. That's not like dangerous, like paranormal, people interested in strange things, but it's not like scary, ghost demonic stuff. So I signed up for it, and I showed up there online Saturday morning, and I started to listen to these speakers, and they were all abductees and contactees. And after, the first half of the conference, by noon, I realized that this was so deep down into the occult, like more than any of the ghost stuff that I had ever studied. And I heard in all of their accounts how similar abductee experiences and contactee experiences are to experiences that people have with ghosts, experiences that people have with demonic possession and infestation and obsession. I mean, going back like thousands of years. It's fascinating. It's like it's blown up, huge blown up. It's estimated, I think, that 3 million just Americans, 1% of the population, has had a close encounter with what we think of as aliens, where they've had a contactee or abductee experience. It's insane.
Yeah, it's all very, I mean, it's just the number of reports that are just like coming in. I mean, like you said, throughout for decades, it's just incredible, like how it just keeps constantly building and growing. Like it's almost like to a point where it's happened almost every year. There's just so many of them, and there's many other ones that have gone unreported.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just said, it's like like I said, like there's 3 million people that admit that has happened to them. Like, and then how many more are there actually? And I realized also in the last couple of years, I never thought that I had any experience with the whole UFO thing. And then as the more I read about the experiences that people had, I realized that I probably did, because when I was growing up, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago at Starve Rock, when I was growing up, it wasn't me that had these experiences, but my brother, who is a year older than I. He slept at the end of the hallway upstairs in our house here in Chicago, and I slept in the room next to him. And frequently he would have what he called dreams, that he was either visited by aliens in his room or taken away on a spacecraft. And this went on the whole time we were growing up. And oftentimes when he would have these experiences, I would have night terrors where I would wake up like sweating, numb with fear, paralyzed, not able to move, not able to call out. And I had the feeling that he needed me, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't move. I couldn't go to him. And it wasn't just till now that I realized that this is something that many abductees and contactees have, where they have a loved one in the house and they are paralyzed when the abductee is having the experience. So I think a lot more of us have had experiences with UFOs and aliens than we are aware of.
Oh, definitely.
I think so too. I'm stalking your Amazon profile here.
Oh dear.
And I see that you do have a number of books up for sale.
Yes.
Most of them are for Chicago hauntings, but you do have some other things that are not necessarily like you have one here for Japanese writing.
Yeah, I started a lot of different things during the pandemic after we had to close our tour company down. One of them was Ghost Ship Fragrance Company, where I started making perfumes inspired by haunted places. So that was one of them. And the other thing I started doing was to start publishing low content books. So I started publishing journals and notebooks and stuff like that, and planners and things like that. And they're all kind of like with a gothic feel. And I published a number of notebooks where people can learn Japanese writing. And the series of notebooks that I created all have, they're inspired by Japanese ghost stories. So each one of the journals has a different Japanese ghost on it, because I love Japanese ghost stories. They're the scariest ghost stories that
Yeah.
inspired, The Ring and The Grudge and all those great movies, Dark Water. Do you guys like those movies?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I
Oh
love
my
those
God, I
movies.
love those.
And they're so scary, but I
actually
just love
we
them.
actually
Totally honest, the Japanese over there are a lot more original when it comes to their filmmaking than Americans are.
oh
Yeah, so true.
oh yeah, they definitely are. And you know what? We actually have, and I don't know if you know who this is, Ursula, but I don't know if she's in the chat right now, but we actually do have an investigator from Japan named Irene. And if we're talking about Japanese horror, she will go all over it in the chat.
Oh my gosh,
So I
that's
don't know
so
if she's
cool.
watching now, but
That's so
she would
cool.
she would explain about it very quickly.
Well, I think
Yeah,
Brad, don't be
they were so much different than Americans because all of our ghost stories were like cuddly, where they always ended nicely, and it was always some family member that had some unfinished business and then they were put to rest. But the Japanese ghosts are mean, vicious, vengeful.
They don't mess
Yeah,
around.
totally different. No, they don't mess around. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's one extreme to the other. There is no in between when you think about that.
Yeah, no kidding.
and it's not just the ghost stories associated with in Japan. It's also even the stories involving murder. Those stories, oh my God, they are also far more brutal
Yeah.
over there than what you see here in the States.
Yeah. And it's crazy because our real story, the true murders and everything else, the true life horror stories in America are horrible. I've just been like, I don't know if I would talk to you about this. I have been for the last couple of years, my Chicago Haunt series of books that I wrote in the 1990s. They went out of print because the publisher discontinued all their local history books. So I got the rights back. So I'm putting all of those books together along with all the other research that I've done since like 2000 when the Chicago Ones 3 came out in 2000. So the last 22 years, I'm putting all of them together into like a Chicago Hauntings compendium that's going to be published actually by the publishing house run by the new owner of Chicago Hauntings Tours. So he's going to be publishing the book. Do you know T. Krulos up in Wisconsin? Monster Hunters, that guy.
No,
Yeah, I mean, now that you're saying, I think it's like I kind of know who he is, but
He's a
if
writer.
I saw a picture of him, I
He
probably
always
would remember him.
appears at the Milwaukee Con and all that stuff, and he's spoken at our Chicago Ghost Con a bunch of times too. But he's a journalist and he's totally into the paranormal, so he's going to be editing the book. So and I've been going back over these stories, that I haven't looked at in so long, and and also incorporating stories that, hey, Carl, not incorporating stories that weren't in the original books that I've looked into over the last, 20 years, 25 years. And man, there's some brutal stories just in Chicago. I mean, it's crazy. Brutal.
Yeah.
We've had so many brutal murder stories in Chicago. Today I was just writing the story of Diane Masters, who was murdered by her husband, who was one of the most high profile attorneys in Chicago in the 1980s. And he was so mobbed up and hooked up into all the corrupt cops. He was best friends with the chief of police in Willow Springs, who actually took money, thousands of dollars from Alan Masters to dispose of the car, of his wife's car, after he killed her. And it was like, there were like 20 cops and judges and detectives that were working with Alan Masters to cover up the murder of his wife. It's crazy. Because I had just found out, and just in the last few years, I had never heard any ghost stories about Alan Masters. We do the whole Archer Avenue tour, right, Nick? All the ghost stories on Archer Avenue. And we could talk about that if you want to, talk about the Archer Avenue ghosts. But I always talked about the Diane Masters murder on the Archer Avenue tour, but I never knew there were any Diane Masters ghost stories. But I found in recent years that some people have seen her standing on the bridge right near Archer Avenue over the Illinois Sanitary and Ship Canal, where her car was hauled out of there after her husband killed her and shot her in the head and put her in the trunk of the car. So several people have seen her standing on that bridge, and several people have also seen her in and around the Willow Springs firehouse in Willow Springs on Archer Avenue. So she's another ghost of Archer Avenue. And man, the story of how brutal her relationship was with her husband, no one really knew about it. And it's just like, man, it's so crazy. And it's really not surprising that all of these ghost stories come out of these real life horror stories that people go through.
There's a lot of stuff that's happened in Chicago. And it's been happening for hundreds of years. One of the earliest things that I know of is the Great Chicago Fire of 1871.
71,
yeah. And then, of course, there's the St. Valentine's Day Massacre that they had. And
then there's the Iroquois Theater Fire in the 1903 and the Eastland disaster of 1915.
I've been trying to look up different disasters and tragedies that have happened. Not a whole lot is really showing up. There's a 2003 balcony collapse.
The porch collapse in Lincoln Park. Yeah. It's interesting. I had a couple of people contact me about the porch collapse. I don't think anyone else has written about this, but I had a couple of people contact me about the porch collapse. This happened in Lincoln Park in 2003, is the same year as the E2 nightclub stampede that happened in the South Loop. That I think 11 people died in that, and that has ghost stories associated with too. I don't talk about this stuff a lot because it's very raw still. It's very recent. But a couple people contacted me about the porch collapse. This was in Lincoln Park, right near the Biograph Theater. So it was right off of Halsted Street, like right there by like Halsted and Fullerton, Lincoln Avenue, that intersection there by DePaul University. And it was just, it was a really nice night, and a bunch of people, a lot of them from DePaul University, had been gathered at this apartment for a party. And if you've been, in Chicago at all, we have a lot of these 2 flats and 3 flats. And in the back, you've got the wooden porches on the back. So each apartment has a little porch on the back, and it's got wooden stairs going down. And little known to most people, these porches can't take a lot of weight. And there were, dozens of people out on this porch, and the whole porch collapsed, and it was the 3rd floor. So all these people fell through the 2nd floor and then down through the 3rd floor. And there were a lot of deaths in it. And I was contacted by 2 different people who told me that they were seeing these apparitions in the alley outside of where the porch was. And, very common and things like this. But, looked into this and I wrote about it. And, the city of Chicago, after that, they started a new, like a task force to inspect porches. but it really wasn't enforced. And so things like this actually continue to happen, and there continue to be deaths like this. So it's really not surprising that those kinds of ghost stories still go on, because, if nothing happens to change the conditions that lead to stuff like that, oftentimes you will still have these paranormal experiences that people have. It's almost like they're trying to tell us, got to do something about this.
Mhm. Yeah, I saw a picture there. I don't know. Oh, this one here says the day after it collapsed. So somebody took a picture of the area,
Yeah.
um, and the balcony that is still standing after that looks like in pretty shoddy condition.
Yeah. And I know they replaced that with an all steel staircase in the back and porches after that happened. And there's also a sign there that says no parties or gatherings, I think, now on the new one. So they definitely got the message, but not a lot of people got the message, and we still see a lot of those wooden porches. Even here in my neighborhood, we have a lot of I live in a 2-flat myself. We have an enclosed back porch, but it's a similar situation. I mean, you've been to my house, Nick, where we've had people out smoking on our back stairs, but we've never had it's not this you don't have the ability to have that many people, but those open back porches like that, it's so dangerous. I had a friend here in the neighborhood back in around 2000 who had a party at his apartment, and he thought it was funny. He put like a swimming pool, like an inflatable swimming pool, out on the little back porch, exact same building,
Oh
and filled
man.
it up with water. And that was like, we didn't, he had no idea. It was like 1,000 pounds of water, and thank God nothing happened, because he had that pool out there and people in it, and it was insane. So by the grace of God, nothing happened. But yeah, but that whole neighborhood where that happened, Lincoln Park, especially that triangle there at Lincoln and Halstead and Fullerton. There's so many ghost stories there. That's where the Biograph Theater is, where John Dillinger was shot. Very haunted location. Hey, Kelly. And the Red Lion Pub was the first place I ever did an investigation in 1988, Easter Sunday night. The Red Lion Pub was where I was invited to help out with an investigation when I was an undergrad at Benedictine University. And I met Jim Horan, who went on to become a big parapsychologist. And we met at like 10 o'clock at night there with a whole team of his people. And we were there till about 5 a.m. And that was the very first investigation I ever did that hooked me into paranormal investigation. And yeah, that whole area is really strange of, that's just the edge of Lakeview going into Lincoln Park. But a lot of people have said that they have seen the ghost of John Dillinger in that alleyway, who was gunned down by the Chicago FBI in 1934 in July. That was after he had that whole string of bank robberies, not only in Chicago, Indiana, and then he was up in Mercer, Wisconsin with Babyface Nelson, who was in his gang. And, there was just a string of dead cops and even federal agents behind him by the time he got to Chicago then, and went out that night to see a gangster movie at the Biograph. And when he and his prostitute that he had gone to the movies with, and her their chaperone, who was her madam, they came out of the theater, they walked those couple steps and went, and he knew instinctively that there was something up, and he took off down that alleyway, and he was just showered with gunfire and died in that alley. And since probably like 1975, people have claimed to see this bluish figure of John Dillinger in that alley. They talk about having cold spots in the alley and things like that. But over the years, I've met a lot of people on our tours when we've taken them there, who have told me that other things happened in that alley since Dillinger died, including 2 people told me that they had witnessed people commit suicide in that alley and 2 other murders in that alley. So I'm sure there's stuff going on in the alley, but whether it's John Dillinger, I don't know. Probably not, since none of these experiences people have had happened before the 1970s, and he was killed there in 1934. So probably not John Dillinger, but they still call it, old timers like me still call it Dillinger's Alley. So very haunted area.
Well, considering the history that Chicago has and the long history, there's all kinds of things that I'm sure that can be found anywhere.
Well,
Yeah, well, you had talked about the city cemetery
yeah.
in Lincoln Park. Nick, you know this. I mean, this
Oh,
was the city cemetery. You've been
yep.
there.
Yeah.
And were you to the zoo with us?
Yeah, I was there too with you guys.
Yeah, what did you think about so just as a background, Lincoln Park in Chicago, where the zoo is, the history museum, the ball fields, all that stuff, that was originally the city cemetery going back to the mid 19th century. And it was only open for about 10 years because there was a cholera scare that broke out. And so it was shut down, and everybody was told to move the bodies they had buried there, move their loved ones to other cemeteries. But there had already been, I mean, like probably 30,000 people buried there in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they shut it down. And the night of the Great Chicago Fire, the fire, of course, started on the south side of the river. But because of the high winds that night, flaming debris was blown across the river, and the fire just kept going north with the high winds that night. So it reaches the cemetery where everyone is fleeing with everything that they can carry. Everybody flees to the cemetery thinking they'll, kind of run away from the fire, but it keeps coming. And so at that time, all of the grave markers of the city cemetery were made of wood. And so the fire just plows through the cemetery and destroys all the grave markers. So and everybody that has sought shelter there has to finally go into Lake Michigan to get away from the fire. And finally it starts to rain at like 2 a.m. Thank God. But if you had loved ones still buried there on the night of October 8th, 1871, there was no way to find the grave anymore because everything was gone. So the city decided to just make a park out of it. So they made a park of it, which is now Lincoln Park. And there's still approximately 13,000 bodies still buried in Lincoln Park, under the zoo, under the history museum, all around that whole area. And so we were invited about maybe 6 years ago now to put together a ghost tour. We were invited by Lincoln Park Zoo because they knew the history of the land, and a lot of the staff members had experiences with weird stuff at the zoo. Well, then when they contacted me, I was like, that's interesting, because over the last 20 years, I have had, I don't know how many people contact me about things that they experienced at the zoo. So it was really cool, Nick, right? Because we got to do overnight investigations at the zoo.
Yep.
In order to put together a tour route for the ghost tours that they were going to offer to their members and, the general public each October. So what kind of stuff did you experience there at the zoo, Nick?
Oh man, how can I? It's been such a while since I've even thought about it. I might have to come back to that because again, it's been so long.
I'll just set it up, and if you remember, you can jump in. The first place I wanted to go was to the Lion House at the zoo, because that was the place where literally a dozen people over the years had told me that they had gone into the women's bathroom in the basement of the Lion's house and had looked in the mirrors while they were washing their hands and had seen men and women in Victorian clothing looking back out of the mirrors at them. So we had set up all of our equipment in there the first night that we did the investigations. And I don't do EVP anymore. I don't recommend that people try to communicate with spirits anymore, which is a story for another day. But at that time, I had become very astute in doing EVP, and we got so many crazy. I mean, all the investigations to the zoo were just insane. We picked up the voice of a man with an English accent, who said, it was very clear, and people can go on my SoundCloud and hear all of these EVPs. This man's voice said, "Get out. There's a woman here." Okay. Very clear. Everyone heard it. And we later found out from the staff that the staff all knew that there was some entity in the women's bathroom that was kind of like, he was like the guard, so that whenever a woman would come in to use the restroom, he would tell all of the male ghosts to get out because a woman had come in.
Wow.
So this it's crazy. So we were there for, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 hours. And then, as we always did, we said like, okay, thank you so much for talking to us. We're going to go now. If there's anything else you want to say, we can stay longer so you can talk to us. And this voice said, same male voice, turn out the light. Good night. Clear as a bell. So we knew it was, it was done. The most interesting thing, if you can believe it, was more than that night, we thought like, I wonder if we'll hear any voices of any of the animals, right? So we're in the basement of the lion house, but you have to understand, okay, all the lions are asleep, right? And there's like at least 12 feet of concrete between us in the basement and where the lions are. Okay. There's no one out. You never would hear an animal where we were. One of the EVPs that we got, we had asked, what do you want to tell us about your life here in Chicago? And we got this voice that said, we first got the sound of a lion roaring. It was like unmistakable. You know the sound of a lion roaring, right?
Yeah.
It was a lion's roar, unmistakable, and then a man's whisper, I miss it. So we had asked, what do you want to tell us about your life in Chicago? The lion's roar, and then I miss it. So from there, we the next night we went and we investigated the primate house, where old people like me remember Bushman. He was this famous great ape that lived in the primate house, where like literally millions of people every year would come and see Bushman because he was like a clown. He was a huge ape, and he would like he weighed like 700 pounds or something. But he would like throw food at people when they still had the bars, for the cages. He would throw food at people. He would throw like his poop at people and clown around. So people loved Bushman. And he's actually was taxidermied when he died, and he's in the Field Museum now. And we actually did some EVP sessions there at his taxidermied specimen too, which was, we heard like knocking on the glass of the case that he's in. So that was kind of cool. But we did some stuff in the primate house, and Dave Olson and Chicago Paranormal Investigators were with us, Nick. You know Dave, right?
Yeah, I know Dave.
Yeah, so they were there that night, and they picked up some really interesting stuff in the primate house as well. And we picked up the voice of what sounded like an Australian man talking to us in EVP as well. But the most active place of the zoo was the main barn at the farm in the zoo, where we heard this woman that just sounded like we didn't have anything going on during all the investigation that we were doing, but we were recording everything. And then we took a break after like 3 hours, and we played all the recordings back. And we were just sitting there with our mouths open because you could hear us talking, everything that we were saying it was really lame. Nothing was going on. And this woman's voice was commenting on everything that we were saying. And she sounded like what we could only describe as like the Wicked Witch of the West. This cackly, this high cackly voice. And she was making fun of us. She was commenting on what we were doing. The most chilling one was I was out in the main barn with Michael Esposito. I don't know if you remember him, big EVP expert. And we were doing, just taking readings and stuff. And I said to Michael, you hear me say to Michael, this place really gives me the creeps. And he goes, yeah, I'm kind of freaked out being here. And you hear this woman go, hey, they ought to be.
Oh man.
Yeah. And it's just so clear. I know, people think like, oh, EVP is, it's just, it's not really clear. You can't really hear anything. Clear as a bell. And it was just really, and it was really cool because during that time where we were doing those investigations, we had, hey, Jeff, we had we were able to bring so many people in from Midnight Paranormal, from Chicago Paranormal Investigations, from Ben's group, gosh, we had so many of the top, even Chris Halton came in from England when he was here with Haunted Earth. We had so many top investigators come in and help with these investigations to create these ghost tours at the zoo. So it was one of the greatest experiences ever. But at the zoo there too, and I've just been tweaking my story about this for the book, is the Suicide Bridge that used to stand there over the lagoon in Lincoln Park, where something like 100 people took their own lives between 1893 and 1914, when there was this high bridge of about 60 feet over the Lincoln Park Lagoon. And so many people, it as soon as they put it up, it started to become known as Suicide Bridge, because people started to go there to take their lives, and people would shoot themselves, hang themselves off the bridge, poison themselves. And it just became this sensation. So it's really cool. If anybody is really interested in Lincoln Park, Chicago Hauntings Tours gives Lincoln Park ghost tours with Tony Bielski as the guide. And he was the guide with us. He's one of the most knowledgeable paranormal researchers in Chicago. And he gives those tours just about every night. I mean, he'll go out with 2 people, even if you have 2 people. And they start at the Chicago History Museum, and you go all through haunted Lincoln Park to the lagoon, through the zoo area, to Cafe Brower, and to the site of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It's one of the most highly acclaimed tours in Chicago, and I highly recommend it for anybody that is interested in history, in the history of Lincoln Park, gangster history, or in the paranormal history of Chicago. It's really a great tour that Tony and I first put together many years ago, and he's been doing himself every tour since.
I definitely want to come up and take one of those tours.
Oh, you love it.
Oh, you won't be disappointed, because they're always a lot of fun, and I've also helped on a few of those tours as well.
Yeah, that's right. You have. Yeah, you have.
Why does that not surprise me, Nick? But in all truth and honesty, Nick, I think you would be a really good tour guide.
Did I not try to get you to be a tour guide, Nick? Did I not?
I mean, I was nervous at the time because I didn't know exactly what to present or whatnot, but that's changed, of course.
Hey, Loren.
Definitely be a job. I know you would.
You come to realize, it's like my mom said, you realize that nobody in the room knows more about it than you. So then you just start talking, and it's all okay.
It's like I just take over the entire tour, because obviously I'm someone
well, that's
who,
what you did. Remember when you came on the Lake County tour back in the day?
I remember.
You just took off, and I was like, hey, you can do these tours.
That's the crazy thing about them, because we can just name off just a random topic, and boom, here's this, then this.
Yeah.
You actually know all of this stuff.
Yes, he does.
And guess what? I don't know if you know this, Ursula, but that's even caused everybody else to give me a nickname. And Jeremy, maybe you should say who it is. I mean, what that nickname is of me, instead of me saying it. What do some people call me?
So we like to call him Nickopedia. But lately, we have been calling him the notorious Nick.
Yeah, that's why the name's like that, right?
Although
I
last
was
week,
kind of wondering
I
about
gave him,
that.
I replaced the Nick with Late.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't even notice at first.
Yeah, and I didn't even see that you had changed it, so I have no idea. Anthony has a question about the bridge, and he's wondering if people are still seeing the glowing lights.
At the Suicide Bridge?
Yeah, I think that's the bridge he's referring to.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. I don't know if the listener or viewer has heard it before. There are a lot, as I said, a lot of ghost stories in Lincoln Park and in Lincoln Park Zoo. But honestly, I constantly go out there to the lagoon and I ask people, "Have you seen anything here? Have you experienced anything here?" Because it's a place where a lot of people like to go to fish, even overnight. So a lot of people are there at night fishing. And so this is right
Is it legal?
between, yeah, it's definitely legal. Yeah.
Wow.
This is between, if you guys, if the listeners, viewers know where the overpass is, the pedestrian overpass at North Avenue along Lakeshore Drive in Lincoln Park, that's where the lagoon is, where the bridge was, right where the entrance of Lincoln Park Zoo is. And nobody that I've talked to has actually had experiences there at the lagoon. So it's interesting that so many people there took their own lives or died there. A lot of drownings there too over the years. But as far as I've collected so far, I have not had any people see lights or see figures or anything like that at that area.
Okay.
Wow. Tom says
Um,
here, Tom, that tour will go for 8 hours.
Tom, yeah,
And then
8
Lauren,
hours.
and then Lauren here says we can call it the Nick tours.
About that 8 hours, I would imagine would fly really quick.
Yeah, definitely, Anthony.
I think it would.
He's the best.
But Nick, you really ought to think about this. I
Yeah.
think this could be a good
Chicago Hauntings needs tour guides.
Yep. Well, you know what? I should say, I mean, I don't even know if I've told you about this, Ursula, but in addition to this show, I do have like my actual own show that I do that's called, believe it or not, it used to be called Paranormal and Historical Locations and Legends, but after we had some guests on, yeah, it was a long title, but at the time I didn't know the better title, but we had these guests on at one point, and this actually started off as a joke. They were joking it as the Nick Files, but before you know it, the name stuck, and it's been the Nick Files ever since.
It's great. It's perfect.
What it literally is, it's literally like a educational show, because I'll literally cover a location like from beginning to end, like starting off with the history and then going right down to the ghost stories, and if available, provide videos, photographs, like of the activity, as well as historic pictures. I mean, it's just perhaps maybe I do have that special gift to eventually do the tours, because I'm able to do it pretty much online in a way.
Yeah, you'd be great.
Oh, geez.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think? People ask me this all the time. What do you think is the most like the legit most haunted place in Chicago, the Chicago area?
Oh man, I'm probably going to have to point it to. It's really kind of between two places, to be honest. I'm going to probably say Lincoln Park, obviously goes in the mass graves, and believe it or not, the other one is, and you're going to know this one all too well, Ursula, Carl Schurz High School.
Oh, yes. I just talked to you about this today because I want to interview you about Schurz High School for the book, because it wasn't in the first book.
And let's not forget,
3 books. Yeah, I haven't written about it at all. But I've investigated, I don't know how many times. You've investigated it 100 times, probably more than I have.
Probably more than any
Ghost Con there, and during the Ghost Con, people were having experiences there.
Yep.
We had we did the Chicago Ghost Con for 10 years. We would do it at different places, and we did it at Carl Schurz High School. This is on Addison and Milwaukee in Chicago. And my dad actually went to high school there. We we have the ghost con there, and I don't know how many women said that they heard voices or had the door messed with in the bathroom, the women's
Oh.
bathroom on the first floor in that hallway where you first come in off the what is that, the west side of the school, where we have that main entrance to come into the ghost con. That women's restroom at the end of that hallway, so many people have that experience, and I had it myself. I was laughing at them. I thought they were messing with me, and then I hadn't. I went in there. I was by myself. I went to the bathroom. I heard this man's voice go, "Hey," right next to me, in the stall next to me, right? And I thought it was Dave Schrader
Yeah.
messing with me, because he
Yeah,
was
Dave
hanging
Schrader was
out
there.
like, yeah, he was hanging out in that area, and he always messes with people. And I came out and I was like, yeah, real funny and he was like, what? I'm like, dude, what the heck? Like, he was like in the auditorium when I was in there and had just come back there, and everybody testified to that was in the area. And so I realized that all these women that had told me they had these experiences in there all weekend, that it was legit. So crazy. And then in the gymnasium, people were hearing another thing that the kids had told us before, because we had a lot of our vendors set up in the gym. I'm sorry, in the gym, not the auditorium. There's a running track at the top, and people hear people running on the running track when no one's running up there.
Nick, is
What are
this
some of the other things that you guys picked up? It sure is, Nick.
Just really quickly, what were you saying, Jeremy?
Is this the high school you've been talking to me about?
Yes, I have, because this is Ursula. I don't know if you remember, but my dad had at one point said that he wanted to try to get some kind of paranormal event going on at the high school, and I actually had the idea of maybe doing like a show like this, like on the big screen, and having different show hosts here from the Things Network take part in it, because they may not be there exactly personally, because we got all these different show hosts from different states, different countries, but I thought it would be really cool to get the network involved. Although Jeremy said, because Jeremy really doesn't live too terribly, like he lives far but not terribly far away from us, but he said he'd be willing to come out to. Yeah, he lives near Fort Wayne, so he'd be willing to come out for it.
Yeah. Well, I just talked to your dad about this last week. We had a long conversation, and he convinced me. So he said he was going to talk to the school, and we're going to try to do something in September.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't hear
so
about it.
So it's going to be the return of Chicago Ghost Con in September.
Oh, there you go, Jeremy.
If we can get the school.
That would be awesome.
There you go, Nick. Job opportunity.
Really quick, I just want to point out to the comments here. Of course, Tom brought up, obviously, Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. We cannot forget. That is another very haunted cemetery. And then Lauren, who lives in Virginia, brought up H.H. Holmes' Murder Castle and the site of St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Murder Castle about a week ago, and I am very intrigued by that place.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
The Murder Castle by H.H. Holmes.
Yeah.
That's
another one I've just
been is that still standing in its entirely?
No, and in fact, there's a post office that was built in the 1930s that's right next to where the Murder Castle stood. This is in Englewood, on the south side. And I got a chance to go down into the basement of the post office, which shares like a foundation wall with where the Murder Castle was. And Nick, Jeff Mudgett, the great grandson of Herman Mudgett, the H.H. Holmes. We got to be friends with him some years ago now. And he actually spoke at Chicago Ghost Con with us a few times. And he, went on to do the show American Ripper for History Channel. But he, he first came to Chicago when he found out who he was, because it was the family secret for his whole life until he was, I think, 50 years old. And then around like the Thanksgiving dinner table, one of his cousins had gone off to college and was taking a genealogy class, and the family thought that they were descended. That the family always thought that they were descended from Robert E. Lee. And this is something the grandmother was always like, "Oh, we're descended from Robert E. Lee." So the cousin had gone to college and taken this genealogy class and came back for Thanksgiving dinner and said, like, "So I'm taking this genealogy class, and I was looking into our family history, and I found out we're not descended from Robert E. Lee, but we do have a very famous person in our background." And he said, our ancestor is H.H. Holmes, who's one of the first known serial killers in America. And the grandfather, he said he jumped up from the Thanksgiving table, his chair slammed against the wall, and he slammed down his fist and said, "That name will never be mentioned in this house again." So this had been the family secret. Well, Jeff then had to figure out, like, what am I supposed to do with this information about myself? Like, I'm the descendant of this horrific killer. And so he decided that he was going to try to identify as many of the victims as he could, because so many of those murders took place in Chicago during the World's Fair. There were so many people that went missing during that time. A lot of people said, I'm going to Chicago to work at the fair. I'm going to Chicago, go to the fair. And there was such transiency at that time that so many people never came home. And a lot of people didn't know, like, did they get married? Did they get a job? Did they decide to stay there? Did they run away? Am I ever going to see them again? Or were they a victim of H.H. Holmes? And so he's trying to identify as many victims as he can so that these families can put these questions to rest, right? Now, Jeff said that he had neurological problems growing up and he would always have seizures, but he hadn't had a seizure in like 20 years. He went down in that basement the first time where the murder castle basement was.
Yeah, Irene.
And he said he had a seizure for the first time in like 20 years. He said he went down in that basement, a total unbeliever in the supernatural, and came up a believer. And it's very interesting, H.H. Holmes, that story, there's so many questions still about it, but that site, I've spoken to a lot of people that live in Englewood, which is probably known as one of the worst neighborhoods in the world. Crime and horrible, just insane, dangerous neighborhood. And I have spoken to a lot of people in the neighborhood, and these are African-American people that have told me they believe the neighborhood is blighted because of H.H. Holmes. They believe there's some sort of a curse on the neighborhood because of H.H. Holmes, which is interesting because there is a known curse of H.H. Holmes that Eric Larson wrote about in his book, The Devil in the White City, where he has a chapter, or I think it's maybe the afterword, where he talks about all the people that were involved in tracking down, prosecuting, executing Holmes, have these horrible, strange deaths. And so there is a known curse of H.H. Holmes, and the people in Englewood believe that the neighborhood has become, which was one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in Chicago at that time, has become cursed because of H.H. Holmes. So it's very fascinating.
It's also interesting, the fact, because like Jeremy, like you asked about, like, if the building is still there. I mean, they may have torn down the building, but it obviously didn't remove the curse, because the intention was, when they tore down the building in the 30s, was to prevent it from being a tourist attraction. And they thought after tearing it down, they would eventually, again, it would be the end of all of it. But no, that's it was almost kind of like the beginning, if you will, because again, the building is gone now, but the horror that dwelled there still remains.
That's a great
And yes,
segue into the St. Valentine's Day Massacre story, because
Yep.
that's the exact situation with not only the site of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but the site of so many locations that were associated with Al Capone and Bugs Moran and the whole gangland area in Chicago, where Richard J. Daley, who was mayor, throughout the 70s and 80s, went through, 60s and 70s, went through Chicago and just methodically had anything torn down in the city that had any connection to that whole era, believing that if he could remove all the physical reminders of it, that you could somehow just scrub that out of Chicago's history. And yet, now, I mean, I don't know how many millions of people have come, millions of people come every year to the empty lot where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre happened, to the empty lot where Capone, where the bar was, where Capone had his first job, to all of these different gangland places around Chicago. You can't get rid of this stuff. It was crazy. A few years ago, we occasionally, with the Chicago Hauntings tours, we would take people on trips outside of Chicago, like the road trips, and several times we went to Las Vegas. And the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, I mean, you could call it the Chicago Mob Museum, because all of the artifacts that should be in the History Museum of Chicago are in Las Vegas, because the Chicago History Museum has nothing
right.
about Al Capone or Bugs Moran or the Prohibition era, the whole gangland era. There is nothing about it in the museum. It's crazy.
Right.
What it's interesting when it's talking about the guy that was tearing everything down at the time. He probably wasn't thinking that what all the stuff that had happened there is probably imprinted onto the actual area and not the physical building. But at the same time, some things could attach itself to the individual bricks and they go out to different places.
I actually own one of the bricks from the wall where at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre site, where Moran's men were lined up and shot. And I haven't had it in my house for a while. Ben Pavlon has it, Nick. He actually borrowed it a few years ago because he wanted to do some experiments with it. And I told him to just keep it because I didn't want it in my house anymore with all the stuff that was going on with me. And so we actually did an event right before COVID. We did an event at a venue in Wicker Park here in Chicago for Valentine's Day, where we talked about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and they brought out the brick. And I also had a heart-shaped brooch that I had gotten from Lorraine Warren that we also did some experiments around that day. But that brick is one of many that have been, labeled as authentic bricks from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And that whole wall has been rebuilt, and it's in the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, along with everything else from Chicago. But there's a legend about these bricks that if you come into possession of one of them, that you become cursed. You have all sorts of financial problems, romance problems, health problems, everything else. I don't know. I've had so many problems I couldn't distinguish whether the brick gave me any of them. But it's interesting.
Have one of the bullet holes in it?
Yes, they oh, I'm sorry. No, my brick didn't have bullets in them, but you can see on that wall they have they've put red paint where the bullet holes, the original bullet holes are, so you can see where they are, and they filled in because what happened, the reason why I got one of these bricks and other people did too, was because after when they were going to tear the building down, Mayor Daley decided to tear the building down and build a senior citizen high rise there so that no one could ever build a tourist attraction there, like we were talking about. And before they could take the wall down, a lot of souvenir hunters came in and took bricks from the wall. So that's one of the bricks that I have. And I mean, it's I mean, it's totally authenticated by like, Sotheby's or some other auction house with all the paperwork and everything. But they filled in the missing bricks on the wall so you can see which ones are the originals and which ones were taken. So it's very interesting, how you see that there really seems to still be energy attached to these things. And yeah, we see this all through Chicago, especially in the limestone buildings. All over the world, paranormal investigators have said that they really think that limestone acts as some sort of either like some sort of like a sponge or
Kind
a
of like a beacon
battery,
almost. It's
like
like
a
a battery, or
battery.
because it contains all
Yeah,
that energy in the
yeah,
limestone.
like it absorbs like events that happen and plays them back. And that goes back. There was a mini series in the 1970s in Britain called The Stone Tape about a group of
Conductor, good.
paranormal investigators went in to investigate this castle, and they found out that it was actually the stones of the building that were kind of playing back events of the past. And it's weird. You see a lot of these around Chicago. We have this limestone. It's like that yellow stone, like the water tower is made of, and a lot of the different churches around Chicago. And all of this limestone was quarried from either Joliet, right by Joliet Prison, which
Yep,
Joliet Prison is actually made of too,
that's right.
and down by Lamont, the end of Archer Avenue, which is also very haunted. And a lot of these limestone buildings are known to be haunted. And it makes you really wonder, does the stone itself have something to do with all these ghost stories that have been passed down over the years? Like at the water tower in Chicago made of limestone. We've had stories over the years of people going through Water Tower Park and seeing this man that seems to be like have hanged himself like in an upstairs window of the water tower. And at Holy Name Cathedral, where there was a shootout between Jaime Weiss and this was back like this was like before Al Capone and Bugs Moran, when Dean O'Banion was shot in his flower shop across from Holy Name Cathedral. And all of Dean O'Banion's guys that just vow that they would get revenge. So everybody was after, the Southside Gang, Johnny Torio's guys, to get revenge for the killing of Bugs Moran. And Jaime Weiss ended up being gunned to death outside of Holy Name Cathedral too. And one of the bullet holes from that gunfight is still in Holy Name Cathedral, and they can't fill it up. The mortar won't harden, or it hardens and pops out. And it's like something's trying to tell us, it's still, this happened. Don't forget about it. And again, it's limestone. It's
Right.
really strange. It's very strange.
I do have to commend those that are torn down these buildings because they didn't want to turn it into a tourist attraction. Because this day and age, a lot of people would find it all too easy to do that, and it would generate a lot of money for that. So I got to commend them for not doing that because of the morbid history behind it.
Yeah, I agree.
There was a question earlier. I'm looking for it right now. This was also by Anthony. Oh, it was about Schurz. He asked earlier, say that the high school, there's a portal or gateway for spirits to travel. I'm not sure if he may have made some mistypes, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure really how to ask. I'm like, if I'm pronouncing his question correctly.
I'm guessing.
I don't. Do you guys know? Do you know? Did you ever find anything out about the history of Schurz? Like what could have led to the hauntings there?
Well, the weirdest thing is, and this was the only time we ever got access to this part of the high school. This was almost 10 years ago now, but like, and this is typical of most schools to have, especially high schools to have them because they're such huge buildings, or in this case with Schurz being probably the largest high school out of all of them in Chicago, was they had that, they had a basement, that subterranean, it was like one of those basements, like a boiler room, like they had like those tunnels, like right throughout under, throughout the basement.
Yeah.
And this was the only time we were able to get access into this part of the school. And so we went down, and then we found out that there was kind of like I guess it was basically like a sub basement. So that took us even down, even deeper under the school. And when we got through that area, we came like across this underground subterranean, almost like chamber-like area. It was very cave-like, to be honest. And there were lights in this area, but then it further went into this wall that continued on into this tunnel that was there. They're like this, it almost kind of reminded me like a small version of like an abandoned mine shaft. And
do you think there were tunnels that went to other buildings in the area?
It was very likely, although honestly, and normally I'm not like this, some of the guys did go into them, but I think I was starting to feel a little claustrophobic because I didn't know.
I could never do that. I'm so claustrophobic.
Normally I'm not claustrophobic, but because we were literally right under the entire building, you kind of do have that fear, like, what happens if there's an earthquake or something? Because that whole thing could collapse. So I just couldn't bring myself to go further in. But I really truly believe that there are underground tunnels that go to other buildings. And I'm actually looking for that picture right now that we did take while I was there. So I'll share the screen shortly.
One of those cities that had to rebuild itself on top of the rubbles of the old city after they had an earthquake or a fire or one of those disasters. Wasn't Chicago one of them?
No, Chicago, after the Great Fire, actually all of the debris from the fire was like bulldozed into the lake, which is also a ghost story because that all became like everything east of Michigan Avenue, like Millennium Park and Grant Park and all that lakefront land east of Michigan Avenue is all landfill created by the rubble from the Great Fire. Oh, wow. And presumably bodies as well. And when they were building Millennium Park, I don't know, 20 years ago now, whatever it was, there were a lot of the workers who contacted me and told me that they were having these paranormal experiences of seeing people in Victorian clothing, being pushed, being shoved, hearing voices and stuff like that, and asking, what's going on here, because like there doesn't seem to be anything that was here.
That would definitely be where I would want to go.
I'm going to share the screen. I found one of the pictures. This was one of the top. This was actually with Anthony and Dave's son, so you guys can get an idea of what these tunnels actually look like. Give me 1 second here. This was I think this was the only picture I was able to take of one of those of these tunnels again, because right after this picture was taken, again, I was starting to get kind of claustrophobic, so I just couldn't venture any further. But this is, give me 1 second. What's that?
This is your own picture.
This is my own picture. Yes, I mean I'm not in it obviously, but I did take it. So this is, again, you can kind of say a hidden secret at Schurz. Here is one of the tunnels. And this is where some of these guys actually stop. I know these two ventured further in, but I didn't go any further because it was getting a lot more tighter. But that is...
Oh, wow. I haven't seen these guys in so long.
Yeah, there's us wearing the original Midnight Paranormal Society logos.
Oh, my gosh.
That is one of the original underground tunnels of Schurz.
Wow.
Was there an underground subway tunnel in Chicago?
Was there? I'm not entirely sure.
You mean, do we have subways?
Underground subways.
Yeah, we have subways.
Well, we do, yeah.
My dad worked on building the subways with the Civilian Conservation Corps back when he came back from the war in the 1940s. So yeah, we definitely have subways all over Chicago. As far as like tunnels under the subways, that I don't know.
I got one final picture now.
That's what I was leading into. Where you took that picture, Nick, could that be connected to the underground?
Oh, good. Yeah, good question. Maybe that was gonna be they were gonna do subways out there.
That's a very good question. I got one more picture I'm going to show. This one actually includes me in it. This includes now the actual chamber. So like the wider areas, and I'm actually leaning in. I'm actually trying to make it as a professional picture, but again, this shows the chamber now, what we found, and it's so weird. Check it out.
That's so crazy.
And yes, you can
It looks like some weird interplanetary thing.
Yeah, it's like it's almost cave-like.
Of the pillars.
Yeah, the pillars. Yeah, and that's the one thing. I think that was the thing that kind of caught me off guard, because you kind of thought, because this was when the claustrophobia started going in. You kind of realize that these pillars are what's holding the building up.
Wow, that's really wild.
And don't mind me, Jeremy. As you can see, I got a little goatee growing here. that was me in my early 20s.
This looks more like a crawl space, because you can't stand up.
No, you can't. I mean, I mean, it is just so tight. I mean, even though I'm kneeling in this picture, I mean, I could stand up a little bit, but I could literally not stand up without like literally bending my back, like in a hunchback kind of shape. You cannot. It's like, I mean, when you first walk in, you can.
It looks like it would be about halfway. No, it looks like it would be about where your shoulders are at.
No, you're actually right. Like when you first walk in, you can stand upright, but it's one of those type of rooms. Like as you go further in, the ceiling starts kind of slanting down and starts caving in. So the point that you eventually have to crawl. So this area in particular was where I think I was kneeling right at the halfway point where I could no longer stand. So
could that have been built on purpose like that?
It very likely was, because construction of the school actually began back in 1908, but it was not complete until 2 years later in 1910, which therefore, and Ursula, if I'm correct on this, Schurz High School is, I believe, the oldest operating high school in Chicago.
Now I really want to go to that school.
That I don't know. I'm not sure. We've got Lane Tech by us. I'm not sure when that was founded.
Lane Tech. I'm looking for that right now. Lane Tech College Prep High School. That one is. Let's see here. It does say. Well, you know what? Actually, I think you. Well, it says that it was. I think looks like it was founded around the same time, because it said it was founded in 1908, which was the same year when construction on Schurz High School was built. So I think both schools, they're about the same age.
Lane's another big school. I haven't heard any ghost stories about Lane at all, but there's got to be some.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. When you first look at it, Jeremy, if you haven't seen what it looks like, at first glance, it almost looks like a church, because it's got like a main center with a clock tower on it. But no, it's an actual high school. So they're definitely among the oldest high schools.
That'd be pretty cool to see.
Well, I'm excited to go back to Schurz, hopefully with our event this fall. Tom, you're right. It
looks like Dracula's hiding place. Thank God for the pillars.
Yeah, no kidding.
What's that?
If I'm able to go, I would definitely like to try to get out there.
Now,
that would be awesome.
One final thing about the underground subterranean areas, the tunnels of the school. During that time when we did take those pictures, we did, however, do, I think, both a EVP and ghost session. And what I'm telling you right now is there's no doubt in my mind that area is definitely active and haunted. It's not just obviously above ground. It's almost like a secret that we uncovered of the school. Like, you have thousands of kids and staff members that go to the school almost every day during the school year, not realizing that there's a darker world literally under their feet.
The thing that I would be worried about doing EVP sessions, either inside the school or down there in that basement, is how far any kind of sound would carry through there. Because there would be a lot of echo, especially in that basement.
That basement, yes, but when you got to the tunnels, because they were so encramped, it didn't cause any echoes at all. I mean, it's better, but it's not an area, though, if you're claustrophobic. But again, I don't think they're going to allow us back down there anymore because that is considered still school property and it's a restricted area.
You guys did you go in there with the Walking Dead cast?
No, that was actually later. That was, I really wish I kind of wish we could have brought them there, but that was, I think, before we brought them in.
Okay.
Which, Jeremy, if you didn't know, we had some of the cast members from The Walking Dead that came out to one because Chicago had their annual Walker Stalker convention, and
one of the cast members really wanted to.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ursula, you could explain.
No, that's all I know because I don't watch the show. I didn't even know who it was, but I think it was like the kid on the show.
Yeah, it was Chandler Riggs who plays Carl on The Walking Dead.
Wanted to do a ghost hunt in Chicago, so they contacted me, the production company, and I was like, I got just the place for you.
And
so I sent them to you guys.
And I got the photo to prove it. Since we're talking about it, check this out, guys.
Yep.
He was a really awesome kid. I mean, he really
that's
enjoyed.
I heard. You guys said he was great.
He really enjoyed his time, like hanging out with us, investigating with us. And we were supposed to get more cast members from the show to come out, but unfortunately, they were unavailable to come. They were unavailable to come out. But at the very least, at least we had him. One's better than nobody.
Yeah. We had some cool people on our ghost tours over the years. We had Virginia Madsen from Candyman, and we had Merle Osmond on our tour one night. We had some cool people. Hi, Eileen.
Hey, Eileen.
Hey, I'm leaving a parking lot, so I figured I'd jump on and
multitasking.
I am finally heading home for the day.
How was the game?
It was good. It was a scrimmage game. It was my son's last time ever playing junior varsity, so.
So you can't miss that.
Yeah, he is now officially varsity.
Oh, it's so nice.
Kelly, who are you asking if they were found to be fake? Who are you asking about?
Not sure. Yeah, I didn't know what she meant by this. Which, by the way, Ursula, I should probably tell you. I mean, first off, Irene, who we were talking about, obviously, I know she was on. Irene, if you're still on, we were just talking about you earlier about
we were just talking about you.
Yeah, the Japanese horror films, and also, if you didn't know, Ursula, we also have a couple viewers from Australia, and Kelly's one of them.
Hi, Kelly.
The group you didn't get to go in with. That's what she was asking, were they found out to be fake? No, I don't think they were found out to be fake. I mean, as far as I know, these were the real actors of The Walking Dead. So that answers her question.
I do know that a lot of the actors, they get invited out to a lot of the paracons and the horror cons.
Mm-hmm.
So, have y'all ever just walked up to someone like an actor or a musician or anything and just said, had nothing to do with paranormal or horror, and you go, would you like to go on a paranormal investigation?
Never thought of it.
No.
Because I almost did that the other night. And it makes me wonder if people actually do that. Has anybody ever said yes?
I never have.
Not that I have either.
Oh.
Did you ask that singer from last night about it?
No, I was going to ask him from Tuesday night. I was going to ask him, but I had to get to darts right after the concert. I might freeze up, but I am listening to y'all. So I've been watching. So.
And you still got some daylight out there.
Yeah. I was going to say,
well, it might be, I don't know. It might be some street lights.
I'm
looking at the actual sky.
Well,
There's still
you have to remember too. I mean, well, Eileen's on the same time zone as I am, so like it's pretty much looking like that over here too.
Yeah. So
Ursula,
okay, Ursula, I'm looking over here, all these different books that you have written, and a couple of them I see are in the Haunted America series.
Mhm.
How did you get involved with them?
Haunted America, they contacted me in oh gosh, I think like 2012 and asked me if I would write a book about haunted Gary, Indiana. And I said, sure. And so I started doing research. This is an interesting story because I started doing research into Gary. I actually was kind of familiar with Northwest Indiana because I had a lot of friends there. I had been going out there for a few years already because I had befriended some people in the Indiana Ghost Trackers, which is one of the biggest paranormal investigation, as you know, Jeremy, one of the biggest paranormal investigation teams ever.
There used to be a chapter here in Fort Wayne, and they've since disbanded. And
Mhm.
honestly, I don't even know if they're around anymore. I don't hear
Honestly,
about-
I don't either. The people that I was hanging around with were from I think Hammond and Whiting and Valparaiso, that area.
Yeah.
So I had gone down there, and the first time I went down there, they invited me to speak at one of their chapter meetings, and I spoke, and then we went to dinner, and then we went and investigated Gypsy's graveyard down there, which was really great. And I did a lot of really cool investigations with them over the years. It was a great group they were always a great group of people. I think there are like a lot of political stuff, as usual, that
Yep.
went on that ended up things unraveling, as
Well,
always
I can tell you
happens.
that because of that, I ended up with 2 members of my team from them because of that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's so typical.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I had been to a lot of places in Northwest Indiana. And so it was great. So I went down there, I started to do a lot of research into it, and I wrote the book. And while I was writing the book, the big story broke about the demon house in Gary. And of course I had to put it in the book. And I contacted Zach Bagans because I'd been on Ghost Adventures in the past with him, and I was always also on his other show, Paranormal Challenge. He would not even talk to me about this story. Would not even talk to me about it. This was after he had bought that, because he immediately bought the house after that story broke. And by the time I contacted him, he wouldn't talk to me about it. So something already happened in the house where he wouldn't even talk about it. And
So
then
the
I went
story
on
about
to
that had already been torn down.
I'm sorry.
By the time I even heard about that house, it had already been torn down.
Yeah,
It had been torn down.
same.
So
with
what
me.
I did, I reached out to The Exorcist in the case that I had read about. And now I'm Catholic. I'm a lifelong Catholic, and I contacted The Exorcist, who's a Catholic priest named Michael Maginot, who's in the Diocese of Merrillville. And he graciously let me interview him, and I talked to him for several hours, and he went through the whole story with me about what had happened. And he was not was not an exorcist when this happened. Each diocese in the world now has to have an exorcist. I think that Pope Benedict made that rule that everyone has to have, every diocese has to have an exorcist now. But there were like 30 exorcists in the United States before he made that decree, and now there's like thousands of them. But so Father Mike never did an exorcism. He never knew how to do one. And in fact, he found out there had never been an exorcism in the Diocese of Gary up until that time. So he went to his bishop and he got the permission to do the exorcism after he told the bishop all the stuff that had been going on with his family. And Father Mike was like, how am I supposed to do an exorcism? I don't know how to do an exorcism. And the bishop told him, look online. I'm sure it's on there.
Oh, boy.
So he went online and he got to be in touch with other exorcists that way and to learn what to do. And they actually, they did the first exorcism at his church. And there were several other parishioners that he had asked to be there because, as you probably know, during an exorcism, the possession victim can have superhuman strength and has to be held down by several people.
I have
And
heard
so
that.
they did the first exorcism, and it seemed to go well. There was some trouble with the woman. Latoya Ammons was the woman, the mom that seemed to be possessed. She, lashed out a few times, but the exorcism seemed to be successful. And so they were very happy. That was easy because usually it takes more than one time, but it seemed to be done. Everyone went home. Father Maginot told Latoya Ammons, he gave her a rosary and said, say your rosary every day, call me so that I can help you come into the Catholic Church. She said, thank you, Father. Thank you for everything. Thank you for helping my family. And she left. Father Maginot stayed behind and he turned all the lights up and cleaned everything up. And he was living in a house away from the church at the time. And so he went out to the parking lot to go to his car. Latoya's car had been parked right next to his. So he goes out to his car and he finds the rosary that he had given her was torn to bits on the ground next to his car. So he knew that the exorcism had not been successful. So they did, I think, 2 more exorcisms before the exorcism was complete. And apparently now the family moved to Indianapolis and they're fine. But I've never been able to talk to Zach about this. But as you guys probably know, Zach, I mean, he wears those glasses now, those prism glasses. And he claims, if you saw the movie Demon House, that he had permanent eye damage from the last night he spent in that house that was filmed for the movie. And Dr. Barry Taff, the parapsychologist that was brought in, very famous, esteemed parapsychologist, one of the top, going back into the 1960s.
Dave?
He was working out in California. Hey, Dave. They brought Dr. Taff in for the investigation at the house, and they thought everything was fine. The house was clear, and they were going to do a thing where they brought Dr. Taff in with his equipment to measure the levels of like EMs and all that stuff in the house and show that everything was fine, everything was calm. And Dr. Taff was having some issues. And it turned out that after that last night at that house, Dr. Taff, he had numerous internal organs shut down and was hospitalized for months. And I mean, like literally ended up living in his car because his insurance, even as a tenured professor, couldn't cover his medical bills. It's one of many, 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 many stories like this in the paranormal where dark things happen to people and they undergo serious mental and physical issues from this stuff. So, I mean, Zach Bagans himself, whether it's a publicity stunt or not, he claims that he has to wear these glasses forever now because of that last night in the so-called demon house in Cary.
I've noticed over the years that he has been wearing glasses, and I think it was just the same as the rest of us. He's just getting older, and his eyesight was getting bad.
No, I figured the same thing too.
Yeah, not everybody can stay 24, you know.
Yeah. Well, if you watch the movie, it actually talks about this. There was some kind of a flash that happened when they boarded him up in the house at the end of the movie, and that he was sleeping in one of the rooms, and there was something that happened, and he says his eyes were never the same since then.
Okay. And it's interesting that you talk about this exorcism because last week we had two exorcists on the show
Yeah,
talking about their own brand new show
No, hold
called
on. Rich isn't an exorcist. He's a demonologist.
he's a demonologist. Yeah.
okay, Demonologist and an exorcist.
There you go.
I have to put that out there, that disclaimer out there.
And yes, Tom, yeah, we did watch the film actually. He showed it to me.
I haven't. I've been wanting to see it, so I have not had a chance to see it yet.
I'm going to say this right now. It's kind of weird to watch a film with Zach and hear him swear without any of the beliefs like you used to, like you're so accustomed to for Ghost Adventures. You hear that uncensored.
Well, it's interesting. The in his museum in Las Vegas, which was really cool. The last time we took a tour to Las Vegas, we went into the museum, and in the middle of the tour, the tour guide was showing us Zach's office in the museum with bookcases and stuff. It's like cool Gothic office. And this bookcase opens and Zach comes out and talks to us. So he came out, and I mean, it wasn't because of me, like he didn't know like we were coming or that I knew him or anything like that. I mean, I really didn't know him. I had been on the show a couple times, but I mean, it wasn't like I was his friend or anything. He came out and he talked to us about the museum and thanked us for coming and stuff. So that was really cool. Made me look really good too as the host of the tour. But he's got in that museum the basement stairs from the demon house on display in one of the rooms. And good night, Kelly. And Father Maginot told me that when they went and dug under those basement stairs with the Gary police, Father Mike was there and the Gary police were there, the chief of police and Gary was there. They dug under those stairs and they found a lot of different items under the stairs that Father Maginot led Father Maginot to believe that someone in the house was doing necromancy. They found they found underwear, they found fingernails, they found locks of hair, all that kind of stuff. And he believed that it was and then he found out upon interviewing family members that the ex-husband of the possessed woman had come to the house when she was at work and asked the children for personal items from her. And he believed that this was so that his new girlfriend, who was known to practice witchcraft, could put a curse on the woman who ended up becoming possessed. I told you I'm a lifelong Catholic. I never knew curses were like a thing. I thought it was just like, the power of suggestion. And then I found out from the Vatican exorcist when he wrote his book before he died a couple of years ago, Father Gabriel Amorth, curses are real. Like you can actually put curses on someone and they work. So it's that was an eye-opener to me. But that is how Father Maginot believed that this all came to happen with the Demon House case, was through necromancy and through a curse that was put on the woman in the house that ended up being the possession victim.
To recap on something that you said that the downstairs, the basement stairs from the demon house is at his museum.
Yes, he has the basement stairs and some of the soil from the basement and some other artifacts that they took out of the house.
Okay, so that begs the question for me, because the way that I understood it is that he had this house torn down because he felt that nobody else should ever have to experience anything in this house that he has and the family has, but yet he takes some of the stuff from the house and put it in that
museum. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because he took a whole bunch, also a whole bucket of the soil underneath the stairs.
Yeah. And he's got, that's like the least of what he has in that museum. He has the cauldron that Ed Gein used. Or was it Ed Gein or was it Jeffrey Dahmer? I think it was Ed Gein used to literally boil his victims' skin off of them. He has Jack Kevorkian's suicide van that he would bring people into and help them take their own lives. I mean, I could go on and on all day. He has all kind. He has the Dybbuk box, that supposedly
the Dybbuk
houses
box.
a demon. So yeah, he has all this stuff, and yet he claims how dangerous it is. And I would never go in that museum now, knowing what I know, but I did go in it. And yeah, again, I wouldn't recommend that anybody go in Zach's museum.
I go to Vegas quite often. Seems like now every other year at the very least, and people ask every single time, "Hey, are you going to check out that haunted museum?" And to be honest, I have no inclination of going stepping inside that door.
Good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Makes
Yeah.
two.
Oh,
That makes
number
two
one.
of us.
Number one, it's $45 admission.
Yep.
And two, I have heard from numerous people that they try to rush you through the museum, that
They
you don't get
They
a
do. Well, the way it's set up is that you have a tour guide, and all the exhibits are in rooms behind doors. So they'll take you through the museum, they'll open up a door, they'll let you like peek inside for like a minute, and then they come out and they close the door. So there's a lot of places where you wanted to linger more, you wanted to check stuff out more, but they wouldn't let you because it was
So
like
it sounds like it's more set up for not a paranormal investigator to visit per se, but more for fans of the show to visit.
It's more like an attraction because mixed in with these rooms are also like kind of fun house things. Like there's a room where there's all like clowns and strobe lights and stuff like that. So it's like, and then there's like people will jump out at you. So it's like a mixture of like fun house and these rooms with creepy paranormal stuff in it.
I try to differentiate the two because us as investigators, we really want to see some of this stuff, really want to feel some of this stuff, really want to, whereas if people and sometimes it's hard for us to go back to those days and remember it, but people who just watch the show, oh, look, and they just keep going. We want to dig deeper into it.
Yeah. Well, I think the most fascinating exhibit at Zach's museum, as far as I've seen with people's chats online and different forums online, there is a room that's dedicated to this woman, supposedly called Lee Sober Shapiro, who, according to Zach, was this big paranormal investigator who was doing experiments like a prodigy, like in all sorts of sciences. And she was doing experiments allegedly on her own and using all of this different equipment that she'd built and all these mathematical equations. And the last night she was alive, she was taking Polaroid pictures of herself where her appearance changed from like looking healthy to looking very pale and thin and drawn and sort of crazy. And you go into this room and you see like some of her papers, you see the photographs and the blow-ups of the Polaroid photos, and you see some of her equipment, and they let you in this room and you're like, oh my God, this is so interesting. Like, what the heck? I never heard of this person. Like, what was she doing? Let me check out this equipment. Let me check out her formulas. What was she up to? And 30 seconds later, they hustle you out and close the door. So we're all out here like looking up this woman, like who was she? Lee Sober Shapiro. There's all these people that have tried to find out who she is and what she was doing and what this equipment was. And, no one's been able to find anything out about her. Zach hasn't said anything else about her. But yeah, I mean, there's things that are really interesting, but you're not really allowed to see enough to help you look more into it, if that makes sense. Like, it's only just like to tease you.
Did you have to keep paying to go back, and that way you can see the next set?
Oh, yeah, maybe that's why.
He is a very smart businessman.
Well, I do have to commend him for where he put the museum, because he is literally half a block away from the gold and silver pawn shop.
Yeah, that's true. And he also found the only building in Las Vegas that wasn't built after like 1970 70. Like, seriously, like he's like in this cool old funeral home, that's actually kind of like gothic. So I commend him for that too. I also commend him for, starting something. I mean, obviously knowing that Ghost Adventures isn't going to go on forever, for actually starting something else, and not
Yeah,
just
he's a
like
great
not just
businessman.
like riding on Ghost Adventures for as long as he could ride on it, actually starting something else. I commend him for that too.
And I need to comment on Brad. Brad, I literally just walked in the door from the first time since leaving the house around 6 a.m.
Wow. Now Tom had another question. I didn't even know about this. So is it true? Did Zach also try buying Robert the doll?
Oh, I bet he did. I never even thought about Zach and Robert, but I'm sure he did.
It would be
Pretty sure he would
interesting.
have bought Lucy if he had a chance to.
Oh, Lucy. Oh my. You may want to show Ursula Lucy, Jeremy.
Who's Lucy?
Oh, here it comes.
So, all right. Hang on. So Lucy is somebody who was found in a safe of a Masonic temple.
Already bad.
Well, hold on. I'm trying to find a picture here.
We don't have Lucy right there. What?
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it's
Oh,
usually
Lucy's
nearby you.
sitting on the couch, but I don't feel like getting up out of my chair right now.
You lazy bum.
Okay, here we go. So, and Lucy has been a member of our family now for about 3 years.
Yes, you have, Tom.
The other host of our show, Adrian, who's not here tonight, she had Lucy for a year and a half. And then a year ago, she gave Lucy to me. And I have had her ever since. And this is her.
Oh, right in front of the Crown Point Jail.
So where did you get Lucy?
She was found in the safe at the Masonic Temple in Salina.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Nobody knows who put her there, why, or even when. So we have no idea how long she's been there. As you can see, somebody had cut the top of her head off and put in all kinds of little trinkets and junk in her head, and then put a resin dome over it that you can actually see through.
I'm laughing at Robert.
Yeah, that's what Robert said too.
Robert, this is not that Lucy. So ever since she's been found, there's been a lot of people that say, oh, that doll is evil, that doll is demonic, that doll is going to do all kinds of scary crap. And the only thing that's ever happened with her was actually when she was still with Adrian and she fell off of a shelf. And what the reason being is because of all this stuff that's in her head, plus the dome itself has made her very top heavy. So if she's not sitting in a, if she is not set right, she's going to tip over.
Yeah.
But I've had her for just over a year now. Nothing has happened.
So you did at one point had her on the show as a guest, if you remember, Jeremy, when we were celebrating my birthday.
Yeah, we did. And Adrian had actually been offered money for this doll. And one of her fears was that whoever was going to try to buy this doll from her would try to turn around and sell it to Zach. And she didn't want that to happen. So long story short, she ended up giving her to me, and she's had a happy home ever since.
And I remember Adrian at one point said that she even wanted to actually try to take the glass off the head to see what else was inside, but that hasn't happened. Oh, they did. They did.
They did before Adrian gave her back to me, and want to say Jan has that list of everything that's in there, but there's a screw, a film strip, fishbone, um, a nameplate.
Like almost like she was a time capsule.
Yeah, that's how we've always
Yeah.
described, like a time capsule.
Yeah, just a bunch of weird stuff in there.
Brad, you had her for a year now. You've been cursing me always in the chat.
Brad, you brought that on yourself. So, see, I'm pretty sure. I'm kind of surprised that she hadn't been offered to Zach yet, but knowing Adrian, that never would have happened.
I wonder what his qualification is for buying items.
I think it would have to be very well known, mainstream almost.
Yeah,
because it would have to be something that a lot of people know about and that they would actually pay money to come see.
Oh, hang on 1 second here, Tom. I almost have to go to bed. Yeah. All right, Tom. Well, I'll see you tomorrow morning. And no, Brad, we're not gonna put a fake roach in the head.
No, Brad, you can make your own doll for that one.
Yeah, something that would make him money. That's apparently what Dave said.
So yeah, it's really cool that you're involved with Haunted America, and so far from what I'm seeing, you only have 2 books at least in that series, or is there more?
I have 3 books in Haunted America, and I have 12 books total. And I've just been working on, as I think I mentioned to Nick, putting together my Chicago Haunts series into like a big treasury that's going to hopefully come out this fall. It's going to be over 350 pages, like the ultimate Chicago Haunts. I'm also doing a book about UFOs called The Devil in Dreamland that I hope to be out early next year. And everybody can find all my stuff. I've got a YouTube series, a YouTube channel called World of the Supernatural, and a series called This Present Darkness, where we talk about the reality of good and evil and the supernatural. And that's also a podcast. And I got a blog, and I've got live events and online events, and everything I do is at worldofthesupernatural.com. So I hope everybody goes up there and signs up for the mailing list, because I send out a monthly newsletter, and I've got stuff on YouTube several times a week and the podcast once a week. And Nick's going to come on that, right?
When is this going to be?
You're going to come on my podcast, right?
Oh, yes.
We're going to set it up.
Yeah, I remember you said that. I just didn't know when.
Yeah.
What night is your podcast on?
It's been on Tuesday nights, and people can subscribe to it on World of the Supernatural on YouTube, and it goes the video version on YouTube and on Buzzsprout the audio version.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hey,
and they can
hey
find all my
guys.
books on the website also.
I'm fixing up to get off. I just got to do this though. So there is my future varsity player.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you.
So he just got home. So we're going to talk about the game. So I'm going to
Awesome.
go ahead and get off. Love y'all.
Oh, bye, Mama.
Take care, Eileen.
All right, I'm gonna skedaddle too, you guys. I gotta get to bed. I'm an old lady.
So
Thanks for having me on.
The show.
Thanks for having me here.
Ursula, it's been a pleasure having you
It's
here.
been great being here, and I hope that you come to Chicago in September for the resurrection of Chicago Ghost Con.
I'm going to try to. I'm fairly close, so I'm definitely.
Yeah, you are. That'd be great.
Depends on what's going on with me at that time.
That would be awesome.
And also, Ursula, I got a text message earlier because I sent the links for the show to let her know. But I know I texted you before. But Kat Hobson, she wanted me to
Oh yeah,
She wanted me to
would love
reach out
come
to
on her
you.
show.
Yeah, she wants you back on her show at some point. So
That would be great. I'll talk to her this week. You can hook us up.
yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
And
Bye, Tom. Have fun at Mansfield.
this has been really great because I got to say, as I said earlier, we've actually, believe it or not, Ursula, there's been a few viewers from Australia watching, so it's been really
cool.
Having a lot of these viewers from other countries watch. That's amazing.
So hopefully with that'll give you some new viewers for your podcast.
That would be awesome. I love it. You guys, it's been so nice talking to you.
It's been a lot of fun. Everybody, next week we currently don't have a guest scheduled, but we're gonna see what we can do about that, or it might just be another open mic night. So another one of them 24s. But until then, everybody, thank you so much for playing along, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
See you later.
See you later, guys. Thanks.